I think for me, it's recognising people are using it and we need to move away from it, but also highlighting and we recognise many of the public's concerns around glyphosate use. And I think it gives public the confidence that as farmers are being as responsible as possible to avoiding glyphosate getting in the food system.
Food and environmental farming groups call for a ban on the use of glyphosate before harvest. What's the alternative? Farm leaders say they hope to persuade the government against extending environmental permitting rules to red meat and dairy producers. Has the beef bubble burst, and a fantastic opportunity to take on a starter farm tenancy in Cumbria? Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johan Tasker.
I'm Abby Kay.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
And it's straight to our top story. Food and environmental groups are calling for a ban on pre-harvest glyphosate applications over concerns about pesticide residues in food. They want the UK to follow the European Union and restrict the use of glyphosate as a pre-harvest drying agent on cereal crops. The Soil Association campaign is being backed by 25 other organisations, including the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Network Chief Executive and Cambridgeshire farmer Martin Lines.
It lines to a lot of our messaging around reducing pesticide use and going on that journey of only using what you need to use, but also highlighting and we recognise many of the public's concerns around glyphosate use. And I think it gives public the confidence that as farmers are being as responsible as possible to avoiding glyphosate getting in the food system.
The government says glyphosate is strictly regulated, Martin. We are due a consultation this summer on its future use. Many farmers don't use it as a pre-harvest desiccant. Of course, many do as well, especially those in the wetter parts of the country, northern England and Scotland, for example, where many growers rely on it. What's the alternative?
I think for me, it's recognising people are using it and we need to move away from it. And it's what is the support and the system that needs, and particularly in Northern England and Scotland. What is the drying capacity, the combine capacity? Do we need swathers to, chop some, cut some of these crops? So how do we get the support to get that system working? We also recognise we have crops that may be distressed because they're full of green growths. They've gone flat on a really wet, stormy year. So if it gets used, that's food, that product, that grain does not enter the food system. So it can, as the same as the EU have done, is find some solutions for really tricky years.
You talk about drying capacity, Martin. Energy costs very high, of course, at the moment. We only have to look at the price of red diesel. Commodity margins, cereal margins already tight. Where do we need to be with all of this? It doesn't stack up, does it?
Well, we've got to recognise, if we move away from like pre-harvest desiccant for oilseed rape, we need swathers and go back to that system. There's additional cost and investment in that machinery and to get that machinery on farm. So how do we make sure that happens? But also when we look at some of the cereals, do we need them at 14.5% if we're using them pre-Christmas? Can we look at the storage and handling of those so we can lift that moisture level up for pre-Christmas use? And then look at those areas that, particularly in sort of up into Scotland where we've typically got wetter winters, wetter autumns, what is that drying capacity or combine capacity that needs to be there? But also got to recognise the public have real concerns around this product. And I want the product to be here for the longer term to help regenerative farmers and where we use it in weed desiccation. But what we also look at, how do we take it out of the system for there? Any farming system that is built around one product, one ingredient, will fall over. Nature will overcome that. And we've already seen resistance happening in other places around that single product.
That's Martin Lines of the Nature Friendly Farming Network. Now, with no Louise Impey with us this week on the Farmers Weekly podcast. Louise, our resident arable expert, of course, taking a well-earned break. But we do have with us Farmers Weekly Deputy Editor Abby Kay. Abby, welcome aboard. This campaign to ban pre-harvest glyphosate, highly controversial. A lot of farmers relying on glyphosate pre-harvest, as highlighted by Farmers Weekly editor Andrew Meredith in his leader article in this week's Farmers Weekly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if anybody's seen Andrew's editorial on this week, but he points out that the signatories to this letter, there's not many from the north, or not any from the north, rather, should I say. So I think it's going to be something that will split people regionally as well, because obviously the use of glyphosate in this way is more common in the north of England, in Scotland, where it's wetter. So there's definitely going to be a difference of opinion in that on that side of things. But also, some of the people I've spoken to are saying, well, it's not really surprising that an organic supporting organisation is pushing this forward. There's a difference of opinion between the organic lobby and conventional farmers. So yeah, it's certainly going to be something that's divisive for sure.
Hugh, it is a divisive subject, isn't it? Even within the farming community. I mean, some of these groups that are backing this campaign are farming themselves. Other farmers say that glyphosate is essential to what they do.
Yeah, it's an argument that keeps going on, doesn't it? Is glyphosate safe or isn't it safe? It would be nice to bottom it out, wouldn't it? You can understand where it's coming from, where the argument comes from. The fact that this is applied directly to the crop. And the cynics in the room might say, well, is this just the organic lobby trying to up their currency in terms of up demand and make a big thing about it? Because, not surprisingly, no one else is making a big thing about it. I always ask the question as well, the fact that we never used to do this. 30 years ago, I don't remember pre-roundupping everything before harvest. We just used to wait for the weather was right and get on with it. So there's a question, I suppose, if wanted to be devil's advocate, to say, well, are we just doing it because we've been sold it? But then some people would quite rightly throw rocks at the radio and say no, because it helps preserve quality. It makes ripening easy, and if you've got a black grass problem, potentially it's very useful as well. So it is it's an interesting scenario, isn't it? I think the one thing underlying here is that it is absolutely key, whatever you're growing, if any system other than organic, it's a key component of it. We use it when we go from cover crops into maize. Most farm systems somewhere down the line are using this, and not just here globally. And this is the other thing, to take this into context. This is a global product. It's not just something that we're doing here. So it's an interesting one. It would be lovely to get to the bottom of it. I think the other question I've always asked is there, what's the plan B? If there was an issue here, is there a plan B? Does the government have to go and subsidise a whole load more grain drying to not only lower our emissions but enable us to get the harvest in and invest in plant there? Are there some other molecules that are in development which do the same job in a different way, etc., etc.? And also, I suppose does it also beg the question around the suitability, and particularly, the main thing we're talking about here is wheat. If we're having to do this to get it in at the right quality, etc., is the breeding, are the genetics fit for purpose? And do we need to think about, are there innovative ways that we can manipulate that wheat breeding to make it less likely that you need to do this? I don't know, just putting it out there. So there's lots going on here. It's going to rumble, it's going to bump, but ultimately, everywhere across the world, the regulators still regulate and approve it. And you can't, not that many people. Can that many people be completely wrong? Probably not. So it'll rumble on. Every so often, the organic lobby will talk about it. Will anyone do anything about it? I think until a regulator changes their mind on it, probably not.
Important, I think, to point out that what we're talking about is a potential ban on pre-harvest glyphosate. It's not happened yet, but we're not talking about a ban on glyphosate as a whole. Glyphosate, of course, as a herbicide widely used, including by many regenerative farmers to clean up fields prior to drilling. But Abby, do you think this could be the thin end of the wedge, that eventually glyphosate could be banned altogether?
The thing that's driven an increased use of glyphosate is obviously a move to fewer cultivations, but also the loss of other actives over the past couple of decades. And it's hard to look at the political pressure surrounding glyphosate, not only here in the UK, but also in the European Union, and think that its days aren't numbered, more generally speaking, and whatever the merits of that, we're left in a situation where we're unusually dependent upon one chemical now to produce our food, and that's not a good place to be. So I think the government, they really need to think about the unintended consequences of banning actives like this. I mean, it was the same thing with neonics as well. Off the back of the ban on neonics, there was an increase in insecticide sprays. We lost 2 oilseed crushers. We're now structurally dependent on imports that, funnily enough, are grown using the very thing that we've banned. There's impact on brassicas in winter birdseed mixes. And I don't actually think that the levels of neonics in watercourses have even fallen by that much. And that could mean a number of things, but it probably means things like pet flea treatments are contributing in some way as well. So I really think when the government is looking at this, and when the EU is looking at this as well, because we're probably going to be under EU rules again soon, they've got a duty to consider the possible wider impacts, really in a more comprehensive way than they are doing, because they need to ensure that some of the unintended but predictable consequences are mitigated in some way. And that just hasn't happened in the past.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, farm leaders say they're hopeful of securing an alternative to government plans that would introduce environmental permitting or a licence to farm for beef and dairy farmers. Environmental permits are already in place for intensive pig and poultry producers, costing farmers thousands of pounds each year. The government is examining whether a similar system for beef and sheep would help reduce water pollution. But an industry group led by the NFU with support from the AHDB and other industry bodies says an alternative would be better. NFU Deputy President Paul Tompkins.
I don't see that actually lifting the permitting model that we currently see in pigs and poultry and lifting it into dairy and beef are actually going to deliver all of the benefits that we want to see. So I would much rather see that we are able to evidence to government that best practice does happen on farm, and where it does happen, those farmers can be much further away from any sort of regulation or permitting or legislative backstop.
So your alternative then, Paul, sounds very much like earned recognition. What exactly is it, and how exactly would it work?
Yeah, well, importantly, it's not up to the NFU or myself to decide how this would look. This would have to be an industry collective way of suggesting something better for the future. What I am doing right now is making sure that when that consultation comes later in the year, it has the space for those open questions for us to be thinking and submitting what something industry-led might look like. So exactly as you suggested, that might turn out to be that in the event that farmers that are demonstrating best practice, those farmers, I believe, do not need to fall under a permitting regime. And that's what we have to give the confidence of government, that we can both evidence and see the improvements that they want to see also.
Now, to some people, Paul, that might sound like allowing farmers to mark their own homework, that we do need some kind of external oversight, but you see that differently.
You know what I see, when I'm going around farms around the country is actually farmers are the best ones to be deciding how we improve and farming in the environment, both water, air, and of course for nature, because the sparks of innovation in this I see happening on farms, not in Whitehall. So farmers are best placed to both have the desire to see improvements and also suggest and bring together the solutions, because that way we will all be onboarded with the improvements that we want to see.
NFU Deputy President Paul Tompkins, thank you very much. Abby Kay, Paul Tompkins there of the NFU, very hopeful that an alternative to environmental permitting will be found. I guess he would be hopeful, wouldn't he? Because that's what he wants. But how likely do you think it is that an alternative will be found?
Well, he seemed to suggest to me that there was some kind of warmth in DEFRA towards having an alternative approach. I mean, the fact of the matter is this is a really heavy-handed way of trying to achieve what they want to achieve. And it's being driven by politics fundamentally, and policymakers who like to use national headline figures to justify reform. I know you spoke about the piece on water pollution that I did a few weeks ago, and how much farmers were contributing to water pollution. In that piece, I talked about how DEFRA uses some kind of top line figures. Agriculture accounts for 61% of the total nitrogen in river water and 28% of the total phosphorus load. But when you actually dig into those figures, they're based on research that's like 25 to 30 years old. It's just insane. And the people who I spoke to for that piece who are actually working on this issue day in, day out, they say government shouldn't be looking at these kind of headline figures. What they need to do is look at which catchments are actually in trouble, about what mix of sources is putting them in trouble, and then trying to work out appropriate solutions from that point. But instead, with this environmental permitting proposal, we've got a government that's looking for kind of an easy catch-all blanket solution to just prove that they're doing something. And it's just a perennial problem with government, isn't it? It's always the case that they're looking for quick, easy wins. They're looking for ways to do things that prove to people or show to people that they're taking action, but it might not always be the most effective way of doing something. And like I said, with the glyphosate, it comes back again to these unintended consequences, because the environmental permitting regime, what it's going to do is add costs for businesses that really can't afford to bear them. And even when you do that, you risk not catching everything anyway, because the money isn't there for everybody to improve infrastructure. In all cases, even if you can get money for things like slurry storage, that might not always be the cause of the problem. If it's leaching from a broken concrete yard or whatever, you can't get the money to replace that. So I just think it's one of those, it's nice and easy, isn't it? It's a nice, easy regulatory solution, but is it actually the best thing for the job? I'm not convinced that it is.
A blanket approach then that isn't the best thing from Abby. Hugh, I guess the question is from you, very much the same. Environmental permitting, would it cut pollution?
No, in a nutshell. It's a bit like, they've brought the permitting in on poultry units, haven't they, and pig units, looking at targeting mainly ammonia. And whilst we've seen a change in the landscape of chicken production because of the change in the overall change in UK stocking density on broiler, it hasn't meant any less farms. It's added cost. Now there's margin in that job that they're paying that cost. Will it make water quality better? I don't think it will. It'll just really wind up farmers. Okay, that's fair enough. The government's quite good at doing that from time to time. We know that. But the reality is, I was in a water quality meeting. We had a really good little meeting in Surrey back in February, which our local NFU guys organised. It was a really good little session. And we had water companies in the room. We had some farmers in the room. We had the EA guys locally came along. Really good guys, area manager, and a sort of guy that works under him. They're going out talking to farmers. Lovely people. And we had a really good talk. And I said to them, if we all suddenly had to pay as a beef unit, because we've got more than X amount, I mean, DEFRA still don't have it clear in their head what comprises a large beef unit. But if I had to pay X £1,000 a year for a permit to carry on farming beef, would it make water quality better? And they said, no, they get it. It's like it's a backdoor way. The EA needs funding properly so it can actually do its job of going out and stopping where there is a problem. And I'm not for a second saying farmers are totally innocent, because we know there are parts of the industry that are not. There have been issues either historically, or there have been acute issues where things have burst and blown open, or where people just aren't managing stuff. We're not all perfect, okay? But we know when you look at the data that there is such it's just a travesty what has happened in the waste treatment world, water privatisation. All of the candy's been given away to the shareholders, been absolutely no investment, and that's why we've got a major issue. And the EA, you could argue, to a certain degree, have been somewhat complacent in that, in terms of how they've bent the goalposts and moved stuff around, not through any form of malice, but purely to adjust to the budget and the resources they have, because they've been underfunded by government. Now, we've got a whole load of new farm inspectors, which is great. People have got out there. It's been really harsh for some businesses. And round here, it's been one of the main things and I've said this before, why people have stopped dairying or stopped doing something, because in the last 2 or 3 years, they've had an EA visit. But is making me, as a beef producer, spend thousands of pounds a year going to improve water quality? No, because I could be spending that money on investing in my holding, doing stuff that would positively have a positive impact and maintain the levels of water quality, which, by the way, are good, that we have around here, through the brook, through the farm, etc., etc. So no, it will not improve. It will just side fund the department that needs funding properly.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm, followed by a message to 88440. Hugh, another busy week this week. Lots of field work going on, weather permitting. What have you been up to?
We cut some silage right at the end of last week, and that was all right, actually. Considering how dry it has been. We actually had some rain on Saturday. We had 2.4 mil of rain here, which we'd had no, like most people, had absolutely no rain since the middle of March. We'd had 40% of our annual rainfall between the 1st of January and the middle of March, then nothing. And then we had 2.4 mil on Saturday. So I'm not quite sure. They keep promising rain, and then it's doing its usual thing. It's, oh, look, the next 2 weeks there could be tinkly, lovely rain for washing in seeds, and then it just evaporates as the screen advances in time. The sort of 4 mil goes to 0.1. So we'll see. But yeah, maize drilling is upon us. That's all set to go ahead today, tomorrow. It's all right. But I said I was pleased with the silage. It was good, and we had some interesting weird mixes of stuff. We had some sort of cover crops that were tetraploid, festolium, and what we had in there, some vetches and clovers. And actually, there was a cock up with the fertilizer delivery, not because I didn't order it in time, because I did, but they cocked up delivering some compound. So we ended up doing a bit of a plan B in case we completely ran out or there was no fertilizer. We had some protected urea about as well. So we did a bit of compound, and then we topped it up with a little bit of urea. And considering as a result of that, I was very careful with some of it, and I actually put half what I would normally put on it. I couldn't put any more on in case the second lorry didn't come, and then I'd have nothing for my maize. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how it performed. Proof, of course, will be in the pudding in terms of when we analyse it, but certainly in terms of the bulk, that was where it wasn't bad. Still not as good as the more traditional, albeit modern ryegrasses on some of the other fields. But yeah, no, the silage was all right. I was quite happy with it.
Busy times on the farm then. Abby, busy times for you as well, of a different sort. You've been out in London this week.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a big awards ceremony for the Women in Ag Awards this week. Some really amazing winners. They are all on our social media page, so definitely worth checking out. We've also got our Women in Agriculture Network, which people are being encouraged to sign up to on the night. We've already got a whole load of members, and I really would encourage any women to sign up to this network because it has such an amazing array of content. We have farmer takeovers, we have Ask Me Anything sessions. So we've got one coming up with Emily Norton, chair of AHDB, next week. We've already had them with George Eustace, with Charlotte Smith of Farming Today and Country File fame. There's just a whole range of really brilliant content. And we've got big plans as well for the future of the network in terms of what else it's going to offer in future. So please do make sure that if you're a woman in ag, you get yourself down to the network and sign up.
Yeah, we'll put a link to the Women in Agriculture Network on the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast, so you know exactly where to go if you want to sign up and find out more. For now, though, on to other things. Beef has been one of the sectors that for the last 18 months has performed strongly, but recently prices have fallen back week on week. This week, producers have been quoted values at below £6 a kilo, ex-farm values not seen since early 2025. Well, earlier, Hugh caught up with lead AHDB analyst and AG show presenter Hannah Clarke and asked her why the price drop?
It's probably quite straightforward answer in terms of the fact that price inflation is really starting to bite consumers. Last year we saw quite steep price inflation at the farm gate, but we also saw that then translated through to the shelf. We're really starting to see that borne out in performance of beef in retail and food service as well. So we're seeing consumers show some resistance to where that price is now for beef products, and people are, pulling levers to manage that. So where they could be switching out of beef, they could be reducing their volumes. So I think in terms of the wider market, the supply picture, the last couple of weeks for cattle kill, we've been comparing to bank holiday weeks and short kill weeks, etc. So the picture's slightly less clear, but in the medium term, that supply picture is still tighter than it has been, and numbers are still on the lower side. But I think at the moment, it's that consumption side that's weighing on things at the moment.
And if we talk about that supply picture in terms of tight numbers, it should be how much tighter will it get, do we think, going into this year and into next? And I suppose at some point that's going to have an impact on pricing, because we're not seeing huge amounts of import product coming in.
On the supply side, our AHDB forecast, we're expecting about a 1% reduction in prime cattle kill for 2026, and we've sort of seen that level in quarter one, which is kind of in line with our forecasts. So numbers ticking down a little bit, and that's probably expected to continue into next year. Well, look, we've seen reductions in the number of suckler cows, and that's the length of time that takes to feed through into the market is sort of baked in terms of that supply. That sort of longer term picture is kind of set for now. You mentioned imports. We've actually seen imports grow in the last 2 months. So, as you'll know, Hugh, data lags often. So we've only got trade data to February at the moment, but we have seen an increase in beef coming into the country, and that was off the back of a slight growth last year as well. The main suppliers of that growth are New Zealand and Australia, as their access increases.
And they've got, I think Australia this year got something like, if they wanted to, they could put up to 54,000 tonnes into the UK, and it'll go up again next year, thanks to good old Boris's deal. Do we need to push more on some of our exports? I'm thinking particularly of the US, because we've got 13,000 tonnes of access into the US market at a time when the US market continues to be utterly on fire and is sucking in every import from everywhere because they don't have any cattle. Are we close to fulfilling that 13,000 tonnes to try and balance our trade difference?
Currently, no. We're still quite a way behind that. So we exported a couple of 100 tonnes of beef to the US for the first couple of months of the year. So, I think there's an exciting opportunity in the US market to grow. It's a high value, really high value market. But it's probably a niche opportunity than some of our main export markets in Europe, for example. And you're right, that US market is absolutely on fire. They've got record low cattle inventories. I think their cattle inventories are the smallest since the 50s, and there only seems to be sort of very early indicators of heifer retention or beef herd regrowth. So I think that strength in the US market is really underpinning globally the trade at the moment, especially when you consider what's going on in China with their safeguard tariffs and the potential risks to other big players like Australia and Brazil. So I think it's definitely an opportunity, and it is growing. Look, we've seen beef exports grow compared to where they were last year, but it's still small.
That's lead analyst Hannah Clarke at the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board. Hugh, I wouldn't say the beef bubble has burst necessarily, but prices certainly have come back.
Yeah, prices have come back, and as you heard in the audio there, it's the sort of the official line is it's the catch up of the retail. The retail has become so high because obviously the farm gate has been high for 12 plus months. It's been going up, and obviously the peak of that farm gate was this time last year when it smashed through the £7 ex-farm deadweight a kilo. So yeah, finally consumers are sort of seeking other alternatives. And you probably had a bit of a lull as well on, not a lull, but there was a run into Easter where demand probably stayed higher. And then we come off the back of that and things slow, people slow on their spending. So yeah, if you talk to processors, they're saying, oh, we got fridges full, we can't move it, or it's moving very slowly. I suppose the irony of the whole thing, and you heard me question you about the US, and obviously Hannah's not going to say anything too controversial because she works for AHDB, but it does beg the question. We've got 13,000 tonnes of quota into the US market. We've filled a few hundred tonnes of it so far. The US market is utterly on fire. And I mean, it just shows no signs of abating. If you look at heifer retention, is still microscopic. It's tiny. I watched a piece on the excellent and informative US Farm Report feed last week, and they're at one of the universities, and they had their head of ag economics. They were talking to him, and he obviously is very into his cattle prices. And he said, look, I cannot see in the next 2 to 3 years, I can see no abatement in these values. And if anything, they're only going to keep going the other way. So in some ways, that is a saving grace. Whilst we've seen imports come up, as you heard in the audio, particularly from New Zealand, interestingly. And obviously, dear old Boris's trade deals do us absolutely, and I can't say how cross I am about it because I'd break every rule in the book. They do us no favour at all in terms of, there's plus 54,000 tonnes now that Australia could send in, et cetera, et cetera. But because that US market is so on fire, it is just sucking in any surplus protein. But the crazy thing is, why isn't it, sucking in hard? Perhaps it's going to, I don't know. Are we sending as much as we can from the UK to try and help stabilise or try and keep the UK ex-farm price higher than it currently is?
And going forward, Hugh, what's your crystal ball telling you?
Look, I think where the money is, if you're a smart outfit, even where the money is now, there's money to be made, okay? Let's not beat about the bush. And actually, cattle numbers, again, as you heard in the audio, 1% less than this time last year. And that was AHDB's prediction last year. Currently, if you track the kill figures and if you track the tonnage throughput, it correlates with what they think. So you're going to have 1% less cattle numbers coming forward this year. So that will ultimately squeeze. And at some point, the retail will catch up with the retail demand will catch up with and the lairages will be empty and they'll want to get cattle in. They'll have to push the price up to get people to come in. But what's alarming for producers at the moment is we're on an SQQ this week of sort of from last week's hangover. It still averages up at 628, but people are being offered sub £6 for some consignments because the processors just don't want cattle. But it'll be the usual unpredictable chaos, and they'll suddenly go, oh, the lairages are empty, and bosh, they'll bid on to get them in. But like I say, we don't export very much. We still import a lot from Ireland. We import roughly 30%, don't we? Most of that comes in from Ireland. Obviously, we're sucking some stuff in from New Zealand, Australia now as well, which we were, but that's increased. That has increased the first quarter of this year, without a doubt. And that's mainly probably going into food service, although some of our retail friends, as we know, offer some of that as well. It would be really good if we had a really strong export. Imagine if we had a factory in the UK processing cattle that all it wanted to do was export products. My God, that would be a revolution, wouldn't it, in terms of beef? And underpinning and solidifying beef demand and beef values right the way through on a long-term trajectory as well, given the state of global cattle inventories everywhere are low. So it's not horrendous, but there's still money to be had. But I think that I suppose the big overlying thing for the beef sector is the terrifying amounts of capital that are tied up on the hoof. And store prices have waned a little bit the last week or two, but they've certainly 100-day cattle have shown no signs of abating, and the demand for those to keep those finishing yards full, that is still there. So scary numbers. We just don't really want it to drop any lower.
Well, let's have a look and see exactly what those numbers are telling us. Hugh, this week's markets, what's happening?
Thank you very much, Johan. The finished deadweight drops back again this week, 620.9, back from 628.1. The live weight, 343.7, that's back about half a penny on the week. Sheep prices, SQQ on the deadweight, 837.3. That drops back about 5p. Live weight actually edges on about a penny, 402.8. Pig price continues to fall, I'm afraid, 180.2 back from 180.9. Onto the arable markets, and again, a little bit of cheer, particularly in the wheat markets, or certainly some firming, not massive, but at least it's going in the right direction. Feed wheat 179.4, that gains about 150, nearly £2 on the week. 192.30, milling wheat goes up by about £3.5 this week. And actually, that 192.30, the spot is ahead of last year. Last year, 182.30, so it's tenner ahead exactly. Feed barley, no great dramas there. It's actually dropped back 50p, 155.30. Oilseed rapes 471.30, so that's gained getting on for about £12 again this week. So some markets moving in the right direction there. Feed peas 203.70. That's up £2. Feed beans 219.20. That goes up a massive £7 on the week. Diesel price, no great fluctuations, 104.09. It is marginally back, about 0.4 of a penny on last week. But a year ago, depressingly, it was only 63.4.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, applications are opening this spring for a new farm tenancy in Cumbria as part of a wider push to help young people into agriculture. Whins Farm near Kendal is being redeveloped by the Addington Fund as a flagship starter farm. I caught up with Addington Chairman Simon Mountjoy and I asked Simon how the initiative came about.
As a charity in foot and mouth, Addington helped Mary and Joe Blades, who were the farmers there, brother and sister. And when Mary died 3 years ago now, she remembered a number of charities, of which Addington was one, in her will. But also her will wanted the farm to go to a keen, enthusiastic young farmer. Those are her words. And that was quite difficult. The holding was quite run down. The barn roof was falling in. Things were well tatty is probably very kind. To find somebody that was keen and young and could afford not just the farm but the renovations was difficult. And Addington stepped in to fulfil that role on the basis that we could let it to such a person when we'd owned it and done the renovations.
Those renovations now, Simon, all but complete. It looks fantastic and not an easy place to farm, but this is a real opportunity for somebody who wants to get a foot on the farming ladder.
Well, really hope so. It's obviously it's the first one for us doing this. It's been superbly received both by people that might farm it and people that support us and people, like you, Johan, and people that listen and read things. Yes, we've done it well. Is it an easy farm? Oh dear. It's a tough place up there, Johan. It's beautiful in the summer, absolutely stunning. But we don't go there in the winter very often. There's a reason for that. It's blinking wet, cold, and it's a hard place. But there are people that farm there, and it is an opportunity for someone.
A real opportunity then. What sort of tenant or tenants are you looking for? Individual or indeed couple?
The keen, enthusiastic young farmer. An exceptional individual. We hope they will only be there for a few years. The tenancy was 7. We're chock-a-block. I think we're over 33, 4, 5 people in a couple of days of launching the open day. We'll take that to expressions of interest. So we rule out and don't waste too many people's time. And then full tender for a smaller number of those. An exceptional individual, I think, yeah, and we're not quite sure at the moment. A couple, possibly, definitely sheep. But the new farmer, it's not somebody down the road expanding. It is somebody getting an opportunity to go on their own. That's what we're really looking for, and make a go of it.
Not quite open to offers then, Simon, but you have an open mind, a broad view on the sort of people who will be interested.
I'm really looking forward to seeing people that want to come forward and have a look, but also to hearing what they think, whether 7 years is long enough, too short. It's not a massive farm, 68 acres with 210 fell grazing rights. We hope that somebody will I say it in inverted commas, use us for a leg up and move on. And that would be the ideal.
Simon Mountjoy there from the Addington Fund with an excellent and exciting opportunity for a new entrant to take on their first farming tenancy up in Cumbria. Abby, an absolutely fantastic opportunity for the right person.
It's really good to see this come up, isn't it? Because so many people are struggling to get a foothold in the industry at the moment because, land prices are insanely high. And we've seen a massive reduction in the number of county farms that are available as well. Councils are strapped for cash and selling them off at a rate of knots. So to see somebody like another organisation take this on, it's just I'm really happy to see it.
The next question would be, it's quite clear though, this is this is not an easy farm to farm. It's a starter farm, but it's but it is going to involve some hard work.
Absolutely, but then doesn't all farming? And knowing the young, enthusiastic people that are in the industry, I'm sure they're not going to be short of applicants. Let's put it that way. I've never met a farmer who's scared of hard work.
It's a brilliant thing, isn't it? And what a place, just nestled next to the M6 as you go up the start of the Loon Gorge there in Cumbria. When you come up the M6, it's that land on the right, just before T-Bay. I mean, it's stunning as a landscape, but making, 40, 50, 60 acres of farmland and a load of common rights pay there, that's going to be challenging. I mean, it's a really interesting project. Great that it's potentially going to give an opportunity to some new entrants. But the very task in itself of making that pay, particularly in the current support environment, I mean, that's a challenge in itself, isn't it?
A tenancy very much for somebody determined to carve a career in agriculture rather than somebody toying with the idea or wondering what it might be like. Not for the faint-hearted.
No, it's not. It's yes, to anyone, they might think, oh, that's a really good opportunity. You can go there. I mean, look, you've got to probably create other income to actually survive there. But it's a difficult part of the world to farm in. It's a difficult part of the world to farm in when there were generous upland subsidies and other such things. It's an even more difficult part of the world to farm in the current climate. I mean, on the positive front, I suppose sheep values are high, but then you've either got to have stock or you've got to invest in those stock to get going. But as we've seen before, sheep are a phenomenal gateway drug, as it were, into farming. They have served the purpose well for many a successful farmer that comes from a non-farming, entitled background, or haven't inherited anything. They've been hugely successful in getting people going on the first run. And this is a great initiative. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see who they select as their tenant. And it'd be really interesting to catch up with those tenants, wouldn't it, in a month or two, once they've got their feet under the table, to see how they're going to make this acreage pay in the remarkable location that it is.
And Abby, Addington offering open days, asking for expressions of interest. They really are going about this the right way in trying to find the right tenants.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they're also offering additional support, aren't they? It's not going to be kind of a traditional landlord-tenant relationship. There's going to be mentoring, there's going to be business support and all kinds for the successful applicant. So, yeah, it's just such a positive initiative, and I'm glad that we're able to talk about it today.
Abby, indeed, thank you very much. We will put a link to the tenancy details for Whins Farm on the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. That is to the Addington Fund and to land agents GSC Grays who are handling that tenancy application. Good luck to everyone who might be interested in applying. That is it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We do hope, as always, that you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johan Tasker.
I'm Abby Kay.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening.